Hello and welcome to another Spectrum Geeks video. My name is Dale and this is another video in my Learning to Fly series, and in this video we're going to cover taking the Flight Radio Telephony Operator's License. I just did it, I've passed it, but it was different to what I expected, so I thought I'd share this video so that you can be better prepared for when you do your radio licensing. Okay, so I've got all my paperwork all over the place, so there may not be the best structure to this video, but I wanted to kind of get things out of my brain and onto the camera to help you if you're looking to do your Flight Radio Telephony Operator License, or FRTOL, something like that. It's the exam basically you need to have, the license to operate radio in a plane or a helicopter. I think it may even apply for hot air balloons as well. So things have changed. I think it was since late 2022, and I knew that things had changed, but when I came to sit the exam I was expecting one thing and it was slightly different, not mega different, but I'll talk to you about how I've prepared for the exam, kind of how the process went. I can't share with you the route that I took, because obviously the examiners ask you to destroy everything before you leave, so you can't take out any notes, you must rub off all your lines on the maps and stuff, but I'll give you a rough overview to help you prepare a little bit. So in order to do the exam you need to have a couple of things sorted out. So let me just check on my bits of paper here. So the first thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to completed and passed your communications ground school exam. So I have another video on that that's quite old. I mean, I passed that exam on the 7th of January 2022, so quite a gap between doing the ground school exam and actually taking the radio operator's exam, but you need to have passed that before you can go ahead and do the practical. And then in addition to that you also need, let me just look up the name of the other thing, you need to have your examiner, your instructor, as you go through your PPL training, they will be completing an SRG 1171 form, and that's basically them ticking off as you've been flying that you've basically been doing, ground to ground, air to ground, taxiing, inbound, outbound departures, speaking to different transit zones, etc. You have to have done both of those before you can sit the practical exam, whereas before you could just basically go off and do your practical exam without any kind of sign off from your instructor. So you need those two things first, so the practical communications ground school exam and assigned SRG 1171. Once you've done that, you can get yourself booked in with an examiner, but I recommend you do a few things to kind of make sure that you're best prepared and do some revision. So one of the things that I did, again it was ages ago now, but if there's any options that come up, this will actually also help you with your communications ground school exam if you haven't done it already. I had already done it. There's a guy called Irv Lee, I'll put a link down in the description. He does some online Zoom courses to help prepare you for the communications exam and the practical as well, and that's in addition to the easy PPL communications exam that I did as well. They do a prep on easy PPL. I think it's about £100. I hadn't done that because I'd already done the course with Irv Lee, but these will be things that help you prepare a little bit. Obviously the whole of the communications, both practical and the exams in flying, is based on the CAA CAP 413 document. So that is a beefy document, which I have printed off just over here, and it's quite dull reading, if I'm honest. I printed it off with 4 pages per page, so if you're having trouble sleeping I do recommend that you have a read through that, but that is what your exam is going to be based on. So make sure that you've read through CAP 413 and you understand all the content, because that is how you are going to be tested. So read through CAP 413. That's probably obvious, and your instructor's already mentioned that to you, but just to be on the safe side, read through all that, understand when you should be doing Mayday calls, understand when you should be doing PAN calls, and how you handle them and everything. Don't get too stressed on having to remember the exact phraseology for some of these things, because you do have an aid memoir, which we'll touch upon in a moment. But again, understand how you should be communicating to different types of ground station, ATC, etc., because those things will come up on your exam, which we'll touch on in a moment. Other thing that I recommend that you do is have a look at CAP 2118, and that is the exam, basically examiner's manual. So this is all freely available online. I put some links in the description at the time of doing the video, but this will basically give you an understanding of what the examiner is testing you on, what they've got to ask you questions about. They can't ask you any questions outside of anything that's not related to CAP 413, and it will give you some indication of the tick boxes that they need to tick to make sure that you are basically safe in the air and you can comply with the CAA requirements. And one thing, after you've done the actual practical, which again we will speak about in a moment, there are some questions that are scenario-based questions based on the scenario that you did your test on, and some examples of those scenario questions are in the back of the examiner's manual as well. So definitely worth having a look at that to get yourself kind of up to speed, etc. So again, that's another good reference, which I have a link in there. As mentioned before, I did the early training, and there was some kind of slides and stuff that again, recommend checking that out. Definitely, I think it'd be more helpful if you don't have any communications understanding, you haven't done the ground school exam. It wasn't as beneficial to me, I don't think, for the actual practical piece. But I did my radio exam right at the end of all my training, so I kind of had lots of actual flying experience to build up some things. But again, I will note it again, make sure you are referencing CAP 413 phraseology when you do the exam, because there are things that you hear and probably things that you've been taught and things that you do that are not necessarily compliant to CAP 413. So again, I'll mention in a moment, try and get it all fits together, a couple of key things to keep in mind there. Then there is another document that I recommend you read, which is CAP 2325, and this is guidance for candidates on what to expect in the exam and what you need to take with you. There are certain things that you can and can't take into the exam, which will help you and kind of give you a bit of information about the formatting. So again, reference these documents. I'll talk about them a little bit. This is from memory though, I'm not reading through everything, so definitely check those out as well. And then the other thing, a couple of things that I thought were quite handy. On the CAA website, there's many different safety sense documents, and I recommend checking out the Safety Sense Leaflet 22. Again, that's another one. It's the radio telephony for general aviation pilots. And again, it's got lots of stuff that's kind of summarised from CAP 413, but in a slightly more digestible form. So me personally, after I'd read through CAP 413, struggled to stay awake many times, kind of this helped as a bit of a refresher as well. So I recommend that you check that out as well. And there is also, I'm trying to think of the name of the thing. I'll put it down here. There's another document that I didn't read. Basically just run out of time in terms of my prep. But if you can download that from the CAA website, or you can buy a specific book. I just can't think of the name of it. It's down there. So that's how it kind of best get you prepared for it, I think, in terms of things to read. So now let's talk about the actual practical exam itself, what to expect, how it's going to go down, what you can and can't take in with you, and yeah, how basically best to be ready. Okay, so it is exam day. What do you need to do and be prepared? So as mentioned already, when you turn up for the exam, the examiner is going to ask you for a few things. They're going to ask you for some photo ID. So obviously you take your driving license or your passport. They're going to ask you for the signed and completed SRG 1171. So that's that document we spoke about already. It should be signed by your instructor, but also you have to sign as well to declare that you have gone through all of that syllabus and you're confident and comfortable with what it is you're about to be tested on. Again, you will need your exam results slip for your communications exam as well. So your school probably has that provided already, but I took a copy with me just to be on the safe side. You also will need, and you may be tested on it, or at least checked, you will need a current chart. When I went to do my test, I realised that I didn't have a current chart. The new one had just come out a couple of weeks ago, and because I hadn't flown, I hadn't got a new chart. So get a current chart, make sure that you know what the current chart is and that you have one. And then you can take in with you pens. So obviously I recommend these non-permanent pens. That's what I use for all my flight planning. And you can take a ruler or rulers. So I took these two. You want a long one because you're probably going to have some long routes on there, and I just had this short one handy just for some shorter ones. I can cover those off in a different video. That is why I think these ones are helpful. But yeah, that's what you need. And you can take in some note paper. So basically I took in around 6 A4 blank white sheets of paper and a pen. That's all you can take. You will be checked to make sure you have no personal electronic devices on you and hand those in. You're not allowed to have any other aids. They are the things that you can take in with you. Then once you have basically signed everything in, you will be put into a room. And this is where things are slightly different to me compared to what I was expecting. So I was expecting there to be a monitor and a radio with squawk and radio codes and everything on there that I would replicate doing certain things based on where a plane was on the screen, and I would be communicating that to the examiner playing the role of different radio operators. That wasn't the case. I think that's how things used to be when things were scenario based. So in the previous exams, you would get, I'm just trying to find a piece of paper here, that you would get given a piece of paper with a scenario or a route on, and you would have to kind of go through that. That's not how it works anymore. So in the exams now, you have a chart for the local area that you fly in, or at least the region you fly in, I should say. The route that you take is most likely not going to be in an area that you normally fly. So I fly from Gloucester, so very specifically the examiner's route is not anywhere near Gloucester, so I don't have any familiarity with what's happening. So I'll talk about example route in a moment, not referencing the one I actually used, of course, to give you some expectation of how things go down. So yeah, so now you don't have a computer screen or anything. There is a radio that is, the examiner has another radio. Obviously you've got your chart and you're going to be given a scenario, and again there's an example of that in that examiner's handbook, and we'll go through one in a moment. And you're basically going to map it out yourself, draw your lines, your headings, everything, and then you're going to basically in your head think about where you are as you go through the exam. The tip I had is, and it kind of helped me, and again we're going to the scenario in a little bit, for the exam you have the length of the time the actual flight would take you. So for me it was a 55-minute flight, so the maximum duration of the exam would be 55 minutes. Obviously if you are a sadist, you could punish yourself and try and get it done in 10 minutes by just rattling through everything. I don't recommend you do that, by the way. I found a point where I was going a little bit too fast on the exam, had to slow myself down. But I recommend that you have a paper clip. So again, you can't technically take one of these in. I did ask the examiner for one, and they gave me a paper clip, and I used the paper clip to basically pretend that the paper clip was the plane on the map, and I could move the paper clip along on my route for me to kind of mentally remember where I am and kind of who I should be speaking to, my distances and everything as well. So keep that in mind. That's my little tip. Use a paperclip, kind of pretend to be the plane, because as you're going through in those 55 minutes, you've got to decide where you are based on what's happening and what you're seeing and what you're not seeing. So that would be my first tip. Ask if you can take a paperclip in or be provided one to kind of be your plane on your map. So once you get in with all those pieces of paper, you will be given the scenario for the test. So the scenario will be something like this. And again, there's an example of this kind of thing in the examiner's prep guide and everything. So I'll just give you an example of what's happening. You get to decide what your call sign is. So my recommendation there is be the call sign of the plane you fly most regularly, so it's easy for you to remember. Don't create anything extra hard for you. Based on the type of exam that you're doing, so for me, obviously PPL for aircraft, fixed wing, single engine. So I was a fixed wing SEP type, and then you choose what type you are. So I decided to be a Cessna 172. You get some information about what your aircraft equipment you have. So typically it's going to be a fully serviced aircraft with standard equipment, one VHF radio, fully functional transponder, including mode C, and its default setting is conspicuity code 7000. Your rating will be a PPL-A with no instrument rating. So remember to keep all these things in mind as you go through the exam, what your restrictions are. One POV, so you're flying on your own, no passengers. And then you will be given the route that you will take. So for example, again, I fly from Gloucester, so it wouldn't be this, but the route could be Gloucester to Elstree via Burford and Farringdon. So your route is always going to have at least two legs. It's not a direct route. And in this example, and actually in my real test as well, you get to fly through two different types of restricted airspace. So you're going to have to ask for permission to transit a certain zone and also enter military airspace. So you're asking for a zone transit for one of them and max penetration for the second one. So hopefully you've done that in reality in part of your training, but if not, things that you should be going over and in CAP 413 as well. So the particular route, again, approximately 55 minutes flying time. So that's the time that you have for the exam. And they give you some information on the NOTAMs, weather and the route information. So for example, any estimates of how long it's going to take you to get to certain points, you make those up as you go. So try and think through in your head, how long is it going to take you to get to your first VRP, or what's your position fix, when you have to change radio after taking off, etc., that kind of thing. All the distances are approximate. So again, I did use a ruler to kind of guesstimate, how many miles things were. If I was traveling at like 90 knots, how long would it take me to get certain places, to give my estimates on positions, next stops, etc. And the test starts in this scenario that you're already booked out, your engine is running, and you're on the main apron at the airfield ready to depart. So the forecast and the weather is suitable for VFR, no clouds below 5,000 feet, and visibility is greater than 10 kilometers, and the winds aloft are calm. So this isn't going to be a horrendous flight in terms of weather, but the one thing I did find is I thought that this would slightly be easier in terms of having full mental capacity on the ground, because most things are easy until you get up in the sky. But actually I found that even with this, mental capacity was drained a little bit as we went through. You'll be given ATIS information. So again, so in this example, Gloucester ATIS information, Romeo, runway 27, QNH 996 hectopascals, and during the test, you will be required to attain the destination weather and find out if it's suitable to proceed to land there, and if not, divert to an alternate. So we'll see again in a moment, you are given an alternate landing location as well if there's an issue. on the runway at the airfield or something. Sometime after a certain point, you will be asked to give directional finding assistance. So remember to be clear on how you request that, which again we'll touch on that in a little bit in my tips piece of the things that I had to brush up on. To basically get assistance to make sure you know you're on your route for your destination. Your examiner may actually give you an airfield to request directional finding information from, that in reality wouldn't be able to provide that service, but it's just a made up scenario or capability of the airfield based on the route that you're doing. Also give you clarification that FIS frequencies are available. So for example, London information on 124.750. If they mention that, there's an expectation that you will be speaking to London information. So factor that into your plan as well. Frequency monitoring codes aren't available. So there isn't going to be any time you're not speaking to someone to have to worry about frequency monitoring codes. And at some point during the test, you will be made aware of an emergency situation that may involve you or somebody else. So you may have a situation where you have to make a mayday or a pan call. I personally had a mayday and a pan incident that I had to deal with, just to be doubly sure I knew what I was doing. And the examiner will kind of make it clear to you how that's going to work. So obviously, for the majority of the exam, they will be speaking in their kind of air traffic controller voice, and then at some point they will say, look, hey Dale, just so you know, your engine has developed a fault, it's running rough, so please proceed accordingly. And then they will go back into their air traffic controller persona, and then at some point they will tell you that your emergency or issue has resolved. They'll say, hey Dale, just so you know, the engine running rough seems to have recovered, whatever it was that you were doing seems to have fixed it, and you're good to go. So that's basically what they give you. They give you the flight plan, so they give you the altitude that you're going to be flying at. They give you the track and the distance, and you've got to work out what the times are going to be. And they also then, like I said, give you your alternate airfield that you may be required to land at. And then they also give you, again, there's a copy of this online as well in that information that I mentioned, but they will also give you this FRTOL practical test RTF aid memoir. And so that's why I mentioned earlier, you don't have to worry about remembering everything for kind of when you're giving position updates, requesting air traffic control service, your pan calls and everything, because it's on this piece of paper. So it gives you the information here of, obviously when you first speak to air traffic control, you say the station, your call sign and your request, they will come back telling you to pass your message, and then you obviously got to give them the call sign, aircraft type, route, etc. All that is on here, and same for when you got to do a mayday or a pan call. It says mayday ×3, pan ×3, station, call sign, aircraft type, etc. So you have this, you don't have to remember it, but make sure you read and reference it when you are doing your calls, because again, remember, this is based on CAP 413, and that's what you are going to be tested on. So that's what you get given. Then you get given 5 minutes, so just 5 minutes, to draw the lines on your map, so you can get your routing down there, put your headings, your time estimates, mark on the map when you think you're going to have to put different calls in to different people. Then the examiner will basically come back, make sure that you've understood where you're going and you've drawn your lines roughly right, that you haven't kind of misinterpreted the information. So again, they will just verify that. You draw your different lines. So basically plan it like you were if you're actually flying it, because you're going to be actually flying it in your mind. And then you'll have 20 minutes after that 5 minutes to basically, on your plain piece of paper, start noting down kind of the structure of any of the calls, certain things you want to do at a certain time. Make a note of all your frequencies. That's the other thing you get given, which I think is over here. No, it's not. I'll put it on the screen. You do get a frequency chart as well with all the different frequencies on the region you are, so you can look up who you're going to be speaking to, and so you can write that all down on a piece of paper as well. So you've got 20 minutes to basically get your rough notes in order. So I spent the 20 minutes basically writing down the radio frequencies for each of the stations I knew I was going to be speaking to, along with London information, marking on my map when am I going to have to put a call in to change to different frequencies, when am I going to put my request in for directional finding, all that kind of stuff in the 20 minutes. And then I'd also try to write out, you know, when I was going through different zones, basically that I want to have my call to this station, and I'm going to request a zone transit, and at this point I'm going to speak to this station, request max penetration. At some point I know that I'm going to have some kind of emergency, so try and get myself writing down you know, what my position is, and my intentions as well. So just to be clear, I'll mention that in my kind of tips piece, but yeah, so just make sure, again, make life easier yourself, utilize the tools that you have available, and that's how it's going to go. So they come back after 20 minutes, have a rough look at your notes, and then they confirm that you're ready. Have a bathroom break is my recommendation. You can take a water in there if you need it. Your throat will probably get dry talking for an hour, and then you're going to go through. So I didn't keep a note of how long we spent. It was less than 55 minutes, but I did find at a certain point I got a bit flustered. I was like, I'm trying to rush this. I'm trying to get all these calls, and I'm moving faster than I need to, and kind of creating an extra load for myself. So take a moment, quieten down, and then get on with it. And that's it, basically. Then when you've finished the exam, assuming all goes well, and you pass, then they will come in and ask you those random questions related to the scenario. So let's say, for example, you might have made a mistake and did a pan call instead of a mayday. They may say, hey, look, you know, at this point you had an engine failure and you did a pan call. Was there something that you might do differently if you have that situation again? You say, oh yes, I should have done a mayday call, blah, 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 blah. They might ask you, you know, if you're not talking to anybody, but you you were lost and you didn't know what to do, there was no VORs or anything, what would you do? And example you give there is, you know, you could go to 121.5 and make a distress call. They might ask you some questions about, you know, things you can use in the plane to help you do certain stuff. Again, all that's related to Cat 413. They're not going to ask you some random question like, what is the price of avgas at your local airfield or something. It's not going to be related to that. Hopefully then, obviously, you pass. They will give you the answer that you have passed, and then they will give you something that's called a hot topic. So this is something the CAA is focused on at the moment, is a hot topic. It's like a 5-minute briefing, and my one was basically on airspace infringement and how you can kind of be aware of using frequency monitoring codes and other things to basically work out what you're doing. And then, assuming it all goes well, you will get your piece of paper you're going to send off to the CAA to basically grant you your radio operator's license. If you are obviously doing this as part of Learn to Fly as well, I recommend that you don't send this off to get your license issued until you pass your skill test as well. It saves you about 80 quid, so you haven't got to pay for 2 licenses being issued. You can have it all done as one. Also, you are tested on your English language proficiency. So this happens kind of automatically if you are a native English speaker. You have an English language proficiency of level 6. If you are foreign, obviously as part of this, they may also give you a rating on your English language proficiency, because that is also required for your radio license being issued as well. So that's what to expect on the exam. And now to talk again, just to give you some of the tips, things that were in my head to keep in mind to help you be most successful in passing your exam. Okay, so we mentioned already the first one, just to recap. First tip is get a paperclip or something very small that you can mark your position on the map to basically replicate your own moving map as you go through. So that's tip number 1, some marking of where you are on the map. Tip number 2 is take your time. Remember, you're going to have probably at least 50-55 minutes to do this test. So time things through. Think about, once you've been given permission to take off, how long does it take? It takes a couple of minutes to climb up and get to your level. So consider that as well. So keep that in mind. Don't rush it. Take your time. Keep your pace. And you fly already. You know this. So don't put yourself under undue pressure. Tip number 3 is make sure you're differentiating on the map whether it is max penetration or zone transit. So again, gotcha for people in my area. When you fly through Bryce, obviously even though Bryce is a military airspace, it's not max penetration there. It is a zone transit. Benson, you require max penetration. So make sure you're looking at your map and understanding, is it max penetration that you need or is it a zone transit? So check that out as well. Tip number 4, I'm probably going to lose track of my numbers now. So tip number 4, but another tip is make sure you know the services that are available to you and obviously how you should be speaking to people. So is it approach, is it tower, is it information, is it radio? So think about who you're speaking to and the services that can be provided to you. Tip number 5, as I mentioned, there are probably going to be periods of time on your route when you are not near an ATC or someone who can provide a service to you. So you should move to London Information and request a basic service. That is going to be an expectation in the exam, I pretty much guarantee, so make sure you include that. Tip number 6, when you are speaking to ATC at some point, request a traffic service instead of a basic service. That will also be another expectation, that you understand that some people can provide you a traffic service, some people can provide you a basic service. Obviously some people could provide you a deconfliction service, but you won't be able to request a deconfliction service during your radio exam because you are PPL without an instrument rating. You can only have a deconfliction service if you have an instrument rating and are flying IFR. So again, remember that as well. Don't ask for a deconfliction service. Tip number 7, something I think is quite common and nearly caught me out before I took the test. Typically when I'm flying and someone speaks to you on the radio, they may say to you something like Golf Bravo Echo Zulu Oscar, Piper Warrior to your left, and normally you would say, you look out the window and you see if you could see it, and you say I have visual with the traffic, or no visual looking, or something like that is what I very commonly hear on the radio. That is not CAP 413 phraseology. You should not use that. You probably won't fail your test if you do, but you will get a little ding against it. So the proper CAP 413 requirements when you get asked about other traffic is sighted or not sighted. There is no looking for or anything like that. So as you go through your flight, the examiner is going to say, Golf Bravo Echo Zulu Oscar, fixed wing, blah blah blah, traveling east to west, 200 feet below you. You decide if it's sighted or not sighted. You're probably going to have more than one, so my suggestion is you do a sighted and you do a not sighted. So just to confirm to the examiner, you know the correct phraseology when you're seeing or not seeing other aircraft you are not looking for. Tip number 7, remember to do a good position report. So when the ATC or air traffic control ask you to give a position report or report your position at VRP Farringdon, for example, they are looking for a CAP 413 position report. So typically when I've been flying, they don't always request or ask for that. They just ask you to report that you are there, so they know they can verify where you are on the radar. But you should give a full position report. So if they say to you, please report at Farringdon VRP, then when it comes to do the reporting, you should say what your call sign is, where you are, what the time is, what is your altitude, what is your next position, and the ETA. Now keep it brief, so you just want to do something like Golf Bravo Echo Zulu Oscar, overhead VRP Farringdon, 23, 2,500 feet, routing to Shobden, ETA 56 or something like that. Keep it nice, short and sweet. And you only need to tell the people what's relevant to them. So you haven't got to tell them all the different other points you're routing to or tracking to. That's what you should say, tracking to Shobden or something. So they know what you're doing, what your expectation is, where you're going to move around in the airspace. So if you don't give a good position report, again, not sure if you're going to fail, but you may get questioning on that. Tip number 8, should be an obvious one, but can sometimes be forgotten, is you do not shorten your call sign until they shorten it. So always Golf Bravo Echo Zulu Oscar, Golf Bravo Echo Zulu Oscar, until they say Golf Zulu Oscar, then you can shorten your call sign. Tip number 8 or 9, I can't remember what one it is now. You may be landing or taking off from an airfield that only has ground services. So again, they're not going to give you approval to land or anything. It's going to be, land at your discretion and stuff like that. Make sure you put your right calls in. You are responsible for making sure people in the airspace know where you are, what you're doing, and what your intentions are. So you report when you're crosswind, you report when you're downwind, you report when you're on base and on final, and that you're landing. You'll probably get a go around as well, because something will happen at the airfield. Make sure you're doing that. That is your responsibility to communicate that, even if you're not being asked to do it by air traffic control, because there isn't air traffic control at that particular airfield. So tip number 10, or it was where we are now, is remember, during your briefing, you've been given information at the altitude you're supposed to be flying. At some point on your route, in the military airspace, for example, you may be requested to alter your altitude. So, you may be asked to fly at not above 2,000 feet. So, obviously, then you're adjusting your height, and then at some point later, provide information or request, depending on obviously the situation, that you are increasing your height back up again to 2,500 feet. That may be your minimum minimum altitude that's safe where you're flying. So again, remember to readjust your heading or your altitude, or if you don't do that, when you get asked to give a position report later, don't report that you're 2,500 feet, because you're not. You were asked to go lower in that certain requirement, and you didn't readjust your altitude after. So again, little gotchas that you might slip up on if you're not kind of fully engaging your brain and remembering what you're doing. So those are my tips based on my experience doing my FRTOL exam. FRTOL. That sounds weird, doesn't it? So that's it. That's my experience and my tips on passing your radio license exam. I hope it's been helpful. Please let me know down in the comments if you have any questions, or if this video has been helpful in you passing your test. This one, like I said at the beginning, I thought it was going to be easier, because I was just thinking that all this stuff is easier. When you do the armchair flying, it's easy to remember all the radio calls and what you're doing and everything. But then stress kicks in, doubt kicks in, excuse me, for me it was more that I wasn't 100% sure what to expect, and then again the fact that there was no moving map and stuff, I was like, oh my god, how the hell do I do my routing and everything? I don't understand. So now you're going to go into this in 2023 at the time of doing this, a little bit more information on how it's going to go, what the focus of the test is. And remember, the examiner isn't really there to fail you. They want to make sure that you are safe and you can be proficient communicating on the radio, nice, short and sweet, and you're not making any particular issues. And again, if you I think the only things that really are going to be an instant fail, if you really mess up the PAN calls or the Mayday calls, that'll be the issue. Obviously, if you hear someone else doing a Mayday call, you may have to relay that. So again, tap 413, it's in there. Make sure you read and you know how to deal with that. And again, just the other thing to remember, again, I mentioned it already, you have this aid memoir. So don't get stuck in the thought process of, oh yeah, but if this was real when I was really having an engine failure, my Mayday may not be CAP 413 compliant. No, it probably won't, because in real life, you know, you're crapping yourself and you just want to do a bit of basic communication, aviate, navigate and communicate. The last thing you're going to be doing is telling people all this information. But this is an exam. They're testing you on your knowledge and requirements of the exam, and you have the aid memoir to prompt your brain. So chill, get on with it, do what's needed, pass the test, be successful, and again, stay proficient, and hopefully you won't ever be doing that test again. But yeah, for me the hardest bit was there's a massive variance when you're actually flying of what people say and what is CAP 413 compliant in terms of radio proficiency. So go buy the book. Actually buy the book. Yeah, go buy the book of what is expected, and you will be successful. So best of luck. Hope it was helpful. Thanks very much for watching. Until the next video, take care of yourself, and goodbye for now.